So, pre-determining the object of cultural difference as such, what do you have? You could have an unobjectifiable feeling of, let's say, anxiety or the uncanny. He also makes a point of saying it's usually not going to come in the form of interesting, sweet, funny, pleasurable. It's more likely to be anxious or uncanny because it's really at the threshold of the sphere of affects that we acknowledge and are able to recognize as a part of our world, as a part of how we make sense of the world. So the things that touch it but aren't in it and aren't out of it, right? Out of it, you don't notice, totally blind. In it, you know it, you recognize it. Something at the threshold, right? You know it just enough to know it's culturally different. Before cultural difference, there might have been this little moment of anxiety or the uncanny. So that's a very important kind of experience to use to track within oneself where this might be happening. And this is very much a kind of meditative practice, actually, to work to reverse engineer from one's affects, not to, let's say, build on them, right? I have, like, think of how racial profiling works. You have some sensory perception. There's like a little something, you don't know what it is. So you will quickly overlay and overdetermine signification, right? And then act. So we're going in the opposite direction, actually. There's a little kind of affective experience and we're kind of curious and going backwards. What is to be gained? What is to be gained if we accept Sakai's notion that cultural difference is not a given? Well, from that premise, what happens is any act of translation and subjectivity is also something else. Once you recognize that as necessarily a political problem, then that engaging in translation of subjectivity is also always a political action. And it participates in the formation of new political collectives or the alteration of existing social relations. Because translation is never just translation, and subjectivity is also never assumed. So I'll pause there, just curious if anyone has responses, comments, free association. All of the delusionary aspects of the world. But delusion sounds a bit too, I think, psychological. I think it really corresponds to what in Marxist theory we call reification or ideology even, or consensus reality, or even normative reality. How do those things arise and constantly, right? Repeat, re-arise, recaptured. The fact that it says in an instant is important. It can only last for an instant. It's very important to know this doesn't have longer duration. And so, of course, in a more monastic tradition, entire societies, social worlds are built around controlling the doors of perception, closing the doors of perception. But Dzogchen will take a different path. And for me, this is why I find Dzogchen very relevant today. Given the contemporary situation, which I'll talk about in week 3, especially around technology and how that has affected transnational governmentality, it seems to me that a 20th century political activism that needs a certain notion of agency and that needs to articulate resistance, subversion, opting out. I feel like that language doesn't always apprehend so well or give us more to work with in terms of our current reality. So I'm interested in Dzogchen at the moment when it, in a way you could say, or within Buddhism altogether, like tantric practices that diverge from a more monastic situation, right? That's a very particular kind of social and political organization around a worldview. And this concept, mind, intellect, and consciousness, sometimes do not even appear at all. Duality does not even appear at all. And then sometimes, of course, it absolutely does appear. Okay, so this is the kind of strange point of Longchenpa. But if you layer this on top of Kuriyama and Sakai, I hope it will be somewhat simple.